The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across our kitchen table. I sipped my coffee, savoring the quiet moment before the day began in earnest. After 32 years of marriage, Margaret and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Our mornings were predictable: coffee, toast, the newspaper for me, her tablet for her. The predictability was comforting, like an old sweater you can't bring yourself to throw away. "Don't forget we have dinner with the Hendersons tonight," Margaret said, not looking up from her tablet. 6:30. I told you yesterday. There was an edge to her voice that I chose to ignore. Right. 6:30. I finished my coffee and stood. "I'll be home by 5. Margaret didn't respond, her attention fixed on whatever was on her screen. I leaned down to kiss her cheek, but she turned slightly, and my lips brushed her hair instead. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but it registered somewhere in the back of my mind. As I drove to my dental practice, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just this morning. It had been building for months. Little moments of distance, slight changes in routine, a growing coolness between us that I'd attributed to the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage. But today, something felt different. Maybe it was the way she'd turned from my kiss, or maybe it was the text notification I'd glimpsed on her screen, a name I didn't recognize, followed by a heart emoji. The first real crack in my world appeared 3 weeks later. I was working late at the office, finishing up some paperwork after my last patient had left. My office manager, Diane, knocked on my door. She lingered in the doorway, fidgeting with her purse strap. "Dr. Mitchell, Thomas, there's something I think you should know. I saw Margaret yesterday, at the Lakeside Hotel." She paused, clearly uncomfortable. She was with a man. They looked intimate. My first instinct was to dismiss it. It was probably a business colleague. Margaret meets with clients all the time. Even as I said it, I knew it sounded hollow. Margaret was a real estate agent, but she rarely met clients at hotels. Diane's eyes were sympathetic. "They were holding hands, Thomas, and they went into the elevator together." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "Thank you for telling me," I managed to say. "I'm sure there's an explanation." After Diane left, I sat at my desk, staring at nothing. The Lakeside Hotel was where Margaret and I had spent our 20th anniversary. It was where we'd renewed our vows, promising another lifetime together. That night, I watched Margaret move around our kitchen, preparing dinner as if nothing had changed. I studied her, the woman I'd shared my life with for over 3 decades, the mother of our 2 grown children, the person I thought I knew better than anyone. Fine. Busy. Showed a couple of houses near the lake. She didn't meet my eyes as she chopped vegetables. Her knife paused momentarily. "No, further north." She resumed chopping, a bit more forcefully. "Why do you ask?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Margaret, listening to her even breathing, wondering if she was dreaming of him. Whoever he was. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would do. I checked her phone while she was in the shower. It felt wrong, invasive, but the need to know outweighed my principles. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Text messages to someone named Adam, filled with intimate details and plans to meet. The most recent was from yesterday. "Same time next week? Can't wait to feel you again." I put the phone down, my hands shaking. The evidence was there, undeniable, but part of me still couldn't believe it. Margaret, my Margaret, having an affair. Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own marriage. I noticed things I'd been blind to before, how Margaret always kept her phone face down, the new lingerie I'd never seen her wear, the late client meetings that left her glowing when she returned home. I hired a private investigator, a decision that felt like admitting defeat. But I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. A week later, the PI handed me a manila envelope. "You might want to be sitting down when you look at these," he said. Inside were photos of Margaret and a man I recognized as Adam Parker, a real estate developer she'd mentioned working with occasionally. They were at the Lakeside Hotel, entering together, then later at dinner in the hotel restaurant, their hands intertwined across the table. The final photo showed them kissing in the parking lot before getting into his car. Nah. The images burned into my brain, impossible to unsee. The woman in those photos was a stranger, wearing my wife's face. That evening, I sat in my car outside our house for nearly an hour, unable to go inside and face her. How do you confront the person who has shattered your reality? What words could possibly express the depth of my pain? When I finally went in, Margaret was in the kitchen, cooking dinner as if it were any other night, as if she hadn't destroyed everything we'd built together. "You're late," she said, stirring something on the stove. I was getting worried. The normalcy of the scene was surreal. I stood in the doorway, watching her move around our kitchen, wondering how many lies she'd told me in this very room. "I had some things to take care of," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. The wooden spoon clattered against the pot as she dropped it. Her face drained of color, and for a moment she looked like she might deny it. Then her shoulders sagged. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of betrayal, while I remained oblivious. Why? She sank into a chair at the kitchen table. "We grew apart. You were always at the practice, and when you were home, you were distant. Adam made me feel seen, appreciated. And I didn't? After 32 years of marriage, you couldn't talk to me about feeling unappreciated?" "I tried, but you never listened. You were always too busy, too tired, too wrapped up in your own world." Her words stung because there was truth in them. I had been distant, focused on my practice, on providing for our future. But that didn't justify her betrayal. "That's not fair. I didn't set out to have an affair. It just happened." I laughed bitterly. "Things like this don't just happen, Margaret. You made choices. Every time you texted him, every time you met him at that hotel, you chose to betray me. But you did. And the worst part is, you're still lying to me. It didn't just happen. You pursued this. You wanted this." "I want you to leave," I said, my voice breaking. "Tonight. I can't look at you right now. There's nothing to talk about. You've been having an affair for 6 months. You've lied to my face every day. What is there to discuss?" "You already did." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, unable to bear another minute in her presence. That night, Margaret slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, the bed we'd shared for decades, the bed she'd likely thought of him in, and felt the full weight of her betrayal crash over me in waves. The next morning, I called my office and cleared my schedule for the day. I couldn't focus on patients when my own life was in shambles. Margaret had already left for work, or so she claimed, when I came downstairs. I spent the day in a daze, alternating between rage and despair. By evening, I had made up my mind. I would not be the one to leave our home. I had done nothing wrong. When Margaret returned, I was waiting in the living room. She paused in the doorway, her expression wary. She nodded and sat across from me, perched on the edge of the sofa as if ready to flee. "I've been thinking all day," I began. "About us, about what happens next." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "Thomas, please, can't we at least try counseling? For the sake of everything we've built together." "What exactly have we built, Margaret? A marriage where you seek comfort in another man's arms? A partnership where you lie to my face for months?" "It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. But our marriage is worth fighting for." I leaned forward. "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you stopped fighting for it a long time ago." Her eyes dropped to her hands. "I don't know, maybe. It's different with him." "No, that's not what I meant. It's just, we fell into a routine. We stopped seeing each other." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Thomas. I never meant for this to happen." "Stop saying that. You made choices, Margaret. Deliberate choices that led us here." I stood up, suddenly exhausted. "You can't fix this. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. You ended it the moment you decided to be with him. I'm just making it official." I walked out of the room, leaving her crying on the sofa. It gave me no satisfaction to see her pain. Despite everything, I still loved her, and that made her betrayal all the more devastating. The next few days were a blur of practical arrangements. Margaret moved into the guest room permanently. We agreed to tell our children together, a conversation I dreaded more than anything. Our son Michael and daughter Emily came over for dinner the following Sunday. They knew something was wrong the moment they walked in. The tension in the house was palpable. After an awkward meal where Margaret and I barely spoke, we sat them down in the living room. The shock on their faces mirrored what I had felt when I first discovered her affair. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, and Michael's face hardened. "No, it's not," Michael said coldly. "You cheated. That's pretty straightforward." Margaret flinched. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake that I'll regret for the rest of my life." He walked out, the front door slamming behind him. Emily stayed, tears streaming down her face. I held my daughter, feeling her shoulders shake with sobs. "It's going to be okay," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. After Emily left, Margaret and I sat in silence. The weight of what we'd just done, telling our children that their family was fracturing, hung heavy in the air. "I understand." She stood up. "I'll start looking for an apartment tomorrow." As she walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and underneath it all, a tiny flicker of relief. The truth was out. The pretense was over. Now we could all begin to heal. The weeks that followed were a crash course in dismantling a life shared for over 3 decades. Margaret found an apartment and moved out, taking only what she needed. I remained in our house, surrounded by memories that now felt tainted. Word spread quickly among our friends. Some reached out, offering support or a sympathetic ear. Others kept their distance, unsure of how to navigate the new reality of Thomas and Margaret as separate entities, rather than a unit. I threw myself into my work, extending office hours and taking on new patients. Anything to keep my mind occupied, to exhaust myself enough that sleep might come without dreams of her. One evening, as I was closing up the office, I received a text from an unknown number. "Is this Dr. Mitchell? It's Adam Parker. I think we should talk." My blood ran cold. The audacity of this man, to reach out to me after destroying my marriage. I deleted the message without responding. Apori. But Adam was persistent. The next day, he showed up at my practice just as we were closing. "Dr. Mitchell," he said, extending his hand as if we were meeting under normal circumstances. "Thank you for seeing me." "Why? So you can ease your conscience? Tell me how sorry you are for sleeping with my wife." "There's nothing to explain. You and Margaret made your choices. Now we all have to live with the consequences." He left, but his visit unleashed a new wave of anger in me. Not just at Margaret, but at myself, for being so blind, so trusting, so naive. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding. I called my old friend Robert, who had gone through a divorce years earlier after his wife's affair. "Time," he said simply, and realizing that her choices weren't a reflection of my worth. There was a pause on the line. I thought about it, planned it even. But in the end, I realized that the best revenge was living well, showing her and myself that I could be happy without her. His words stayed with me, a counterpoint to the darker thoughts that had been swirling in my mind. The next day, I received divorce papers from Margaret's lawyer. She was asking for half of everything, the house, my retirement accounts, even part of my dental practice. I called my own lawyer immediately. "She's the one who had the affair. Doesn't that count for anything?" "Unfortunately, no-fault divorce laws mean that infidelity doesn't usually impact property division," he explained. "But we can fight this. Her affair might not matter legally, but it can matter in negotiations." And so began a new phase of our separation, a legal battle that threatened to drain not just our finances, but what little goodwill remained between us. During this time, I learned from Emily that Margaret and Adam's relationship was already showing cracks. He had been married too, it turned out, and his wife had also filed for divorce. The fantasy they'd built in hotel rooms was crumbling under the weight of reality. I took no joy in this news. The damage was done, and Margaret's unhappiness wouldn't undo mine. One evening, I ran into Margaret at our favorite restaurant, a place we'd frequented for years. I was there with a colleague. She was alone, sitting at the bar. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Vulnerable, beautiful, familiar. Then I remembered the photos, the texts, the lies, and the moment passed. The words hung in the air between us. "You miss what we had," I corrected her, "but you destroyed that." "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." She hesitated. "Adam and I, it's over." I wasn't surprised, but I felt no satisfaction either. "That doesn't change anything between us." "I know. I wanted you to know that it wasn't worth it. None of it was worth losing you." For a brief moment, I allowed myself to imagine forgiveness, reconciliation, but the trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. As I drove away, I realized that Robert was right. The best revenge wasn't in making Margaret suffer or in taking joy from her failed relationship with Adam. It was in reclaiming my life and finding happiness on my own terms. The next day, I called my lawyer. "I want to settle," I said. "Offer her the vacation house and a fair portion of our savings. I'll keep the main house and my practice." And so we did. The divorce was finalized 6 months after I discovered Margaret's affair. It was a fair settlement. Neither of us got everything we wanted, but we both got enough to start over. The ripple effects of our divorce extended far beyond Margaret and me. Our children, though adults with lives of their own, struggled to navigate the new family dynamic. Michael remained angry with his mother, refusing to see her for months. Emily tried to maintain relationships with both of us, but the strain showed in her tired eyes and forced smiles at family gatherings that were now split in two. Our first holiday season apart was particularly difficult. Thanksgiving had always been at our house, with Margaret orchestrating an elaborate meal for family and friends. This year, I spent it at Emily's, while Margaret was alone in her apartment. Adam had returned to his wife, I later learned. Mom asked if she could join us, Emily told me the day before. I said no, I couldn't do that to you. She made the choice for all of us when she cheated, Emily said, an edge to her voice that reminded me of myself. Christmas brought its own challenges. We had always selected a tree together, decorated it while playing the same old carols, exchanged gifts on Christmas morning in our pajamas. This year, I put up a small artificial tree and spent Christmas Eve alone, nursing a scotch and watching old movies. On Christmas Day, both kids came over. We exchanged gifts and had a quiet meal, but Margaret's absence hung in the air like a ghost. Have either of you spoken to your mother recently? I asked as we cleared the dishes. Michael shook his head. Emily hesitated. I had coffee with her last week. She's not doing well, Dad. I nodded, unsure how to respond. Part of me still cared about Margaret's well-being, despite everything. We had shared too much life for me to wish her ill. Maybe you should call her, Michael, I suggested. Not for her sake, but for yours. Carrying that anger around, it only hurts you in the end. Because I'm learning that forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of resentment. Our social circle had fractured along with our marriage. Some friends remained neutral, inviting us to separate gatherings. Others chose sides. Margaret's friends rallied around her, while mine offered support in the form of golf outings and dinner invitations. My sister, Catherine, had been my rock throughout the ordeal. She lived a few hours away, but called almost daily and visited whenever she could. You know what I think, she said during one of her visits as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset. I think this happened for a reason. I raised an eyebrow. What reason could possibly justify what Margaret did? Not justify, never that. But maybe this is an opportunity for you to rediscover who you are outside of your marriage. You've been Thomas and Margaret for so long. Now you get to be just Thomas. Her words stayed with me, a new perspective I hadn't considered. Who was I? On my own. What did I want from this next chapter of my life? Navu waracharacha, ha perspective I hadn't considered. These questions led me to make changes I might never have considered while married. I reduced my hours at the practice, hiring a young associate to take on some of my patient load. I joined a hiking group and discovered a passion for photography. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Margaret at Michael's birthday dinner, the first family event she had been invited to since our separation. She looked older, more fragile, but there was a new determination in her eyes. Thomas, she said, approaching me as the others mingled. Thank you for encouraging Michael to reach out to me. It meant a lot. I'm glad, she hesitated. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did. It doesn't excuse anything, but I think I was running from myself, not from you. It was the most honest she'd been since the affair came to light. I hope you find what you're looking for, Margaret. As I drove home that night, I realized that the anger that had been my constant companion for months had begun to fade. In its place was a quiet acceptance, not of what Margaret had done, but of the fact that it had happened, and that life continued regardless. A year after discovering Margaret's affair, I found myself in a place I never expected to be, at peace. Not completely, not without occasional pangs of loss or flashes of anger, but more often than not, I woke up feeling grateful for the day ahead rather than dreading it. The house, once filled with echoes of our shared life, had become truly mine. I'd redecorated, replacing furniture that held too many memories, painting walls in colors Margaret would have vetoed, creating a space that reflected who I was now, rather than who we had been together. My relationship with my children had deepened in unexpected ways. Without the buffer of their mother, I found myself having more honest, direct conversations with them. Michael and I started a tradition of Sunday morning bike rides, during which he opened up about his own struggles, his career doubts, his hesitant steps back toward a relationship with his mother, his fears about commitment after witnessing our marriage implode. Emily, always the peacemaker, had finally stopped trying to manage everyone's feelings and was focusing on her own life. She'd been promoted at work and had started dating someone new, a kind man who made her laugh in a way I hadn't heard in years. One Saturday morning, as I was preparing for a hike with my new photography group, the doorbell rang. It was Catherine, my sister, with a woman I didn't recognize. "Thomas, this is Diane," Catherine said. "She's new to my book club and mentioned she loves hiking. I thought you two might hit it off." I shot my sister a look. She'd been trying to set me up for months, despite my protest that I wasn't ready to date. But Diane's warm smile and easy manner put me at ease. She was around my age, with silver-streaked dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes that spoke of a life fully lived. "Catherine tells me you're quite the photographer," Diane said. "I'd love to see your work sometime." To my surprise, I found myself inviting her to join us for the hike. The group wouldn't mind, and the trail we're doing today has some spectacular views. She accepted, and as we hiked through the autumn woods, I discovered that Diane was a widow who had lost her husband to cancer 3 years earlier. She spoke of him with love and without bitterness, a testament to the healing power of time. "The first year was the hardest," she told me as we paused to rest on a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley. I kept expecting him to walk through the door, to call me with some silly question about where I'd put his glasses. I nodded, understanding all too well the phantom presence of someone who was no longer there. "But gradually," she continued, "I started to build a new life. Not better or worse, just different. And I realized that David would have wanted that for me." Her words resonated deeply. Margaret wasn't dead, but the life we'd shared was. And perhaps it was time for me to fully embrace that fact, to stop defining myself in relation to what I had lost. After the hike, I invited Diane for coffee. Our conversation flowed easily, touching on books, travel, our children, our careers. For the first time in over a year, I felt a spark of something new, not quite romance, but possibility. As we parted, she said, "I enjoyed today, Thomas. I'd like to do it again sometime." That evening, I called Robert, my friend who had been through his own divorce years earlier. "I met someone today," I told him. "Not in a romantic way, necessarily, but I enjoyed her company." "That's great," he said, genuine happiness in his voice. "The first step is the hardest." Robert's laugh was gentle. "Thomas, she betrayed you, remember? And besides, you're divorced. You're allowed to move on. It takes time. Don't rush it. But don't close yourself off to new possibilities either." Over the next few months, Diane and I developed a friendship that gradually, cautiously, evolved into something more. We took things slowly, both of us carrying the weight of our past relationships, both aware of how precious and fragile new connections can be. Our first kiss happened on New Year's Eve, at a small gathering at Catherine's house. It was tentative, questioning, a beginning rather than a culmination. "I'm not looking to replace David," Diane told me afterward, as we stood on the porch watching fireworks light up the distant sky. "And I'm not looking to replace Margaret," I replied. "Maybe that's why this feels right." Spring brought new growth, both in nature and in my life. I continued to see Diane, our relationship deepening with each shared experience. I expanded my photography hobby into a small side business, selling prints at local art fairs. I even had dinner with Margaret once, a civil affair where we discussed our children and avoided the past. "I am," I replied, realizing it was true. Not all the time, but more often than not. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how far I'd come from that devastating day when I'd discovered her affair. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. I doubted it ever would, but it had transformed into something manageable, something that had shaped me rather than defined me. One evening in early summer, as Diane and I sat on my back porch watching the sunset, she asked, "Do you ever regret it? Your marriage to Margaret?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "Despite how it ended, I can't regret 32 years that gave me my children, countless good memories, and lessons I needed to learn. That trust is precious and fragile. That forgiveness is a gift you give yourself as much as others. That endings can also be beginnings." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Not for Margaret's betrayal. I would never be grateful for that pain, but for the journey it had set me on, the strength I had found within myself, and the new possibilities that lay ahead. The betrayal had broken me, but in piecing myself back together, I had created something stronger, more authentic, more truly mine. And in that rebuilding, I had found not just healing, but hope. Hope for a future filled with joy, connection, and love that honored rather than erased the past. That night, as Diane and I sat in comfortable silence watching the stars emerge, I realized that the best revenge against betrayal wasn't anger or retaliation. It was this: finding peace, embracing joy, and opening yourself to love again, even when, especially when, it seemed impossible. And in that moment, under a sky full of stars, with a woman who understood both loss and renewal, I knew that I had truly moved beyond survival to living again. Not despite the betrayal, but through it and past it, into a life that was uniquely, authentically mine.